congratulations, Ólafur Ólafsson, Libia Castro. My name is Valur Antonson and I am a philosopher and a member of the jury. It was a very difficult choice, but we were very happy with the award. And so now you have the 2021 Icelandic Art Award. I wanted to first discuss a little bit or ask that you're two, you're not one artist, but actually you represent a much larger community. You are more than 200 people that have participated in this artwork. If you would just begin to describe a little bit who are these people and how does that work, so many people?
Mm-hmm. You want to start?
Well, yeah. Where do I start in that? Well, first of all, I would like to take the opportunity again to thank all the marvelous collaborators for the collaboration and to congratulate them as well with the prize, because as we are the one receiving the prize, but for us it's on behalf of everyone. And before we did this work, I started, we did, or not just the work before, but before we did this work now, we had done a work on the current constitution, which was showed and performed for the first time in February in 2008. And for that work we collaborated with one composer, Karolína Eiríksdóttir, and she wrote then in dialogue and collaboration with us a piece for a choir, 2 lead singers, and a piano and a contrabass, mixed choir. And thing was
with the actual constitution.
With the current
as a libretto, appropriating all the articles.
With the current constitution, indeed. Without going more into that, I just want to mention that as when we finally decided to, because it was a long process of maybe not, maybe yes, maybe not, and so on. When we finally decided to do it, I mean, we already knew, and that was a part of maybe the time that it took for us to get started, because we knew that we had to approach it very differently with this work, because the new constitutional proposal that was written in 2011 was a very collective project, first coming out of the very collective uprise in the aftermath or in the wake of or on the occasion of the financial crisis in Iceland and political, and then there was the Pots and Pans revolution, and then they were held first one national referendum or national assembly, and then another one, and then more than 500 candidates ran for the 25 positions for writing the new constitutional proposal. And so we knew we could never invite one person, one composer to collaborate with us on this, and we always knew it had to be much more collective. We had to reflect, or we had to mirror in one way or this very collective process, and that's what we, that's what we embarked on,
And I would also like maybe to explain to our viewers that this is an award for this year, but this has actually been a process been going on for almost 12, 13 years, so since 2008. And so that I explain, you have been in many ways been part of the constitutional process, also representing how it has proceeded. But if you would explain a little bit first, you went into the collective part of the work. You work mostly with musicians, composers, but also activists. If you just would explain a little bit the logistics of that this year, that what happened was more than 200 people, I believe, that worked. That this was composers, This was activists, this was Icelandic people from the streets, and that's a very important part, right? That is the participatory, the public.
And musicians and singers and performers.
Yeah, and also other visual artists and designers that were involved in
many people
the work.
Being in all these categories.
Yeah, in a way, there was also the project itself was for us. How does, in this case, visual arts and music and activism go together, go in tandem? And that was from the beginning kind of the question, and which kind of conceptual frame and which kind of aesthetics, and how can we make this experiment? And therefore, the crossing lines between the two disciplines, music and visual arts, but also beyond the disciplines, because activism is not a discipline, but is an activity of people and of citizens or civil organizations that goes beyond any discipline. So, how could we create a performance where we all together could put light again through art to the content of the new constitution? And how could we meet in the different roles but also exchange roles? Because some of the musicians and composers and we ourselves, the artists, are also part of the activist organizations. So, and some of the activists were also part of the performers, for example, of the musicians that were performing the piece, and the same for the public. And the public could always participate. That's why we, for example, the first idea of creating the environment, it was thought as a monumental environment in the courtyard of the museum in Reykjavik, was thought as a stage that was not frontal. So all performers, musicians, were occupying all the space of the courtyard, also the balconies. So you could have an aerial perspective of the performers, but also look up. And the idea was also that the public would be mixing on both levels in the architecture. So there would be part of the performance downstairs in between the performers and in between the activists, and the same for the balconies.
Okay.
And this was, of course, something that was difficult to make in times of COVID because we got a lot of restrictions. I mean, we have to remember that the performance happened on 3 October, and by 4th October already the new regulations came in that all museums and public spaces should close, like cultural spaces.
Well, there was an emergency meeting during our performance between the health authorities and the government due to the growing numbers of cases of COVID, and there were new measurements were being discussed and taken. And so the same day as we did the performance, at the end of the day, as we were finishing the performance, the new rules were released, and the day after the museums closed, and we could not have done the performance until even still today we could not have done the performance. So having, in the context of that, there was also quite an amazing thing to experience, that having been working on such a long, or on a project that had taken so long time and was so complex and to create, and that you would do it on the very last day.
That
these restrictions are.
Yeah.
And to
the reason why I say this is because of the point of doing things together.
Yeah.
No, a collective project within the arts community where different disciplines come together, but also an activist performance was also a do it together. So that was already a difficult context to have to deal with, because we were thinking of many more people sharing that space. during this performance, and it got reduced to around 200 people. But because it was too rational within the museum, the dialogue went with the institution in such a way that they still wanted to do it, and they allowed people to come in, and that was the public. They separated the public. There were some activists and public that could be downstairs at own risk, but the public was on one side on the balconies, and every 30 minutes a new group could enter of around 30 people and with a distance of 1 meter. Nevertheless, we did the performance inside the museum and outside the museum with those restrictions. So we all together decided, since it was going to be filmed as well, and we were thinking of working the next step, this video installation and video work that we are working on now, we will make it also as a statement in a way for culture and for civil matters.
I wanted also to go a little bit into the basic of this word that you use, performance, because I also want to ask a question for the audience that might be thinking an artwork should be a painting on the wall, or they maybe have accepted that the visual art is a performance sometimes. People put on a show. But any artwork that is worth its names not only raises questions about the subject, but also renders the question of art problematic. And that is certainly in the case where you were working. It's difficult to pinpoint where art ends and politics begin, and where different disciplines begin. And you work as a team, working with many different kinds of artists, but you're also engaging politics in ways that people might ask, is this a political statement, and where is the limit? Or if you can go a little bit into that question, which I think most people think about when they see something like this.
You can answer that too if you want.
Yeah, I can start. First, maybe to put it in context, we have been working now together for 24 years. Yeah, and the subject matters that we have been dealing with have been socio-politically engaged and matters of sometimes more historic matters and sometimes more actual and happening in the moment. And therefore, this piece is also a continuation of our practice in that sense. We are passionately engage. Passionately. I mean, it's our passion. You know how the community lives, how people live, how are the rights of people, and also relevant, what we consider relevant public matters, to make them public again through art. That's something that.
I think you said somewhere to make the jurisdiction, make politics visible. That in a sense you are visual artists, is that you take things that have been put away, silenced, and bring it back, or something like that. Making jurisdiction, was that, or jurisprudence visible?
Yeah, in this case, because this project is of course about the Constitution, and as Ólafur was mentioning before, we had done a prior project that was on work that was on the actual Constitution, the one that is in place, and for us it was us as artists, conceptual artists, we wanted to work with that material.
Why did that come up? Why
because Constitution is the basis, the law that shapes as well society and the life of people, but very often is something that is very hidden from not hidden because it's hidden per se, but it's not in our daily life. So, and that's the reason why we took it as a material, just for ourselves, also to learn, like, okay, what are the laws in place in society here in Iceland. That's
so bringing the law visible to the artists should represent society, but often the very foundation of our society is not represented. We say that artists should represent the mountains, the natures, and we say they should represent people on the streets and etc. But we don't usually think about art dealing with something like the laws that govern us, and that is your approach, I believe, is that you want to take things that artists don't think are
maybe the subject matter that you would be per se put in front. But that's because we are interested in like how do we create the reality we live in.
Or if you go a little bit into that, the artist, because I think the name of the work is In Search of Magic, and if you would explain that a little bit in relation to it has a little bit to do with the agency, right? Yeah.
Sure. Exactly that. I mean, this work has very much to do with agency, which everyone has. In different ways.
That you can act, that you can vote, that you can be free to make the choices in your life.
And then people, then many different views on how much agency these different positions or actions have, and so on, as voting and so on, but with this work. We wanted also to. It is both. So we wanted to apply magic, and magic in this place also is addressing the position of art and artist. I mean, artist and art is about creating something out of nothing, in a way.
Which is magic.
Which is magic, and at the end of the day, I mean, just as we know, I mean, in the work of Unnur, who what was the name of the work? Who was for the Hvatningaverðlaun? Her work is also addressing magic, but interestingly enough, she's kind of revealing how unmagical the magic often is, and I found it interesting because that is often the case, and in the same way you can say, we can also ask ourselves what is magic, like there is always, you can go to the core of it, and then it is a process, usually, and in this, but we wanted, sorry if I jump. Allow myself to make a jump, and in Berlin, where we live or have been living between 2008 and 18, we live at and still are there. We live at Hermannplatz, which is the location where many or even most of demonstrations that take place in Berlin, and there are quite a few, either begin or end. So we have had on many occasions, very many occasions, demonstrations in front of our window, apart from taking part in demonstrations and so on. So we have also, so this work of ours is also, there is also an interest in it and a motivation to do demonstrations differently, which is of course also again not a new thing. Demonstrations are also again a creative process, often artists taking part in organizing them and creating them. But so it's also important from that point of view to think that actually the artist and the performers, it's not just that there are the artists and there are the activists, but the artists and the performers in the piece are also activists at the same time as they are artists, because the performing of the art is also taking on a position of an activist, and vice versa, because we mention it, art and activism, but actually it becomes both. If I'm making myself clear.
I wanted also to maybe put that in a historical perspective, in that this to distinguish between activism and art is not a new thing, but it kind of fell out of practice in the 90s when you began your work in the late 90s, right? And I believe that read an interview with you where you at the time were critical of the aesthetics of the time, the relational aesthetics as it was called. And at that time, people were revolting against maybe the undue power of the, boomer generation, of the '68 flower generation. But you came actually in the '90s and looked at many of the things happening then and said, wow, this is very conservative. And actually you looked maybe back to the '60s and '70s and saw many things that, although that they had gone out of fashion, they could be used further on. And I'm thinking of, I think you have mentioned great names like Bertolt Brecht and his epic theater, which is about making people aware of that they're being fooled, in the sense that they have to take action, understand that there's a spectacle out there trying to force you out of critical thinking, and that art had a role to make people aware of how art is used to fool people, but art can also be used to help them see through deceptions
and illusions.
And in the way you are explaining this, that you are trying to get activism and art in relation again, you're actually building on a longer tradition.
Sure.
And I wonder where you see this now. Are we entering a period where art is becoming more conservative again, or is art? Because I believe that you look at yourself as progressive artist. You see art. You look at art as a way of changing society.
For sure, yes. And changing society. And I think maybe very important is to get the point and to refer to other movements within art before, like you were also mentioning, you were not mentioning it, but it came into my mind. We were very inspired, of course, with the avant-gardes of the first half of the 20th century, like the Situationists.
Right.
You were talking about the spectacle. And also, and also very inspired with Fluxus as well, with live art, but also as well very inspired with things that were happening in Latin America and had been happening in Latin America, like what developed neo-concretism and experiments that were being done in Chile and in Argentina. And so that has informed our work very much, especially the first 10 years. And I think like the question of today is like today there is such a complex and multifarious and such a multitude of artists working in the world that are getting more space and are being included, because I mean we are of course like European artists and in the West, and we are all aware of the history of like Western central, like Eurocentric perspective. I mean, we are, of course, from within working on that. But I mean, nowadays we see so many different developments within, let's say, that stream or history of art engage with socio-political issues that are connected to so many different histories, depending on the context of the place. Like from identity politics to decolonization struggles and I mean this project within the north of Europe is, I mean now referring to In Search of Magic, is a project that also reflects on that history in the north and within the north, since the constitution has been also, the new constitution is also a further step on the process of democratization of society here and decolonization in Iceland by having been a byland or a colony of another Nordic country.
Therefore, if I may just elaborate.
Now maybe I jump to something else.
I want to add, I mean,
I think it's
two things. So I wanted to say earlier, when you asked, and I wanted to add to Libia's answer before on how or why we started on the first constitution work that concretely we had just, because we have been dealing with living together, and how we as people create our societies and so on. And at some point and for us as being from Iceland and Spain, men and a woman, north and south, within Europe, but we often have experienced that things are for us then not for granted. And therefore, for example, we did at some point a work just before, in 2005, a work where we addressed the national anthem of Iceland, where we made a rearrangement of the lyrics or of the words, rearranged the words systematically, so out came a different poem with the same words. And our version, it is called O heilaga tímanna þúsund, O holy times thousand. The original is O God of our country, which is an interesting thing to talk about on its own, and which was a reason also why we wanted to address the matter. But also, the nation state is something we have addressed, and another work we were doing around at the same time and started in 2003 and is still ongoing is Landið þitt ekki til, or Your Country Doesn't Exist. So having done these two works, we, which are part of the PR package of the nation state, the song and the banner, or the song and the flag, which is, by the way, both art projects, if you like, or design projects. So people forget that sometimes when wondering what position art and artists have in addressing real politics. There are designers and artists often involved in creating, for example, writing composers writing the music of a national anthem, which many of them are written in the Romantic period, as around the period that nation states were becoming. So, having done these two works, we thought about the Constitution, why have we asked ourselves, not as today, hvar nýja stjórnarskráin, where is the new Constitution, but at that time we asked ourselves in 2007, where is the Constitution? Because then there was not a new Constitution. And so you could say the question is old for us. So we asked ourselves, why have we never read it? Why haven't we been concerned about it? Why do I know the national anthem and I know the design of the flag, but I don't know the Constitution? And so so we thought, okay, let's use our art to, devote time to it, and let's look at it, let's read it, let's study it, and let's make a work with it, and let's make it public, And that's
and
why.
So you take the. Probably not everyone is aware that you began working on this project before you knew what would happen, because you began working on the Constitution 2007, 2008, right? And for maybe viewers that are not familiar with recent Icelandic history, there was a bank crash, famously called Hrunið here in Iceland, which resulted in major upheaval of many of the social institutions here in Iceland. One of the positive effects was that they started to think about rewriting the Constitution. There was an assembly where we drew people from all around the country to meet and discuss what should be in a new constitution. Then there was an election to an assembly where there were key people from various strata in society that met in order to assemble new ideas for a constitution. Then the Supreme Court of Iceland declared that the election had not been properly executed, so it was declared null and nix. But the parliament put on something called the Constitutional Committee or Council. Yeah, you're right.
Council in English, no? Yeah.
And where they continued the work on the Constitution, and there was this.
They appointed the same people that had been elected by the people. Yeah.
And this was something that attracted interest from all around the world, and constitutional experts all around the world, lawyers and philosophers, scholars, activists all around the world, I think, were interested in this process. And then suddenly, it was not ratified by the parliament.
After being
voted for in a referendum.
And but what happens
so
is
this was the recent history of Iceland.
And many just to continue directly, I mean, many people think, I mean, since it reached international attention, and as happens with the press, and then people, I guess the majority of people, or without any speculation, let's say many people believe that the constitution then just was ratified. So often when you speak to people, people think, oh, but didn't you you wrote a new constitution? Well, yes, a new constitution was written, or a proposal, but it wasn't ratified. So it's also that what we want to do with the work. We also want to make public that it wasn't ratified, and we want to.
It's written, it is there.
And keep it, bring it back to the to the public eye and ear and senses and debate, and with both in Iceland and abroad. I mean, so it is also a part of insisting to not accept that the matter is hushed away, pushed away, or suppressed, silenced.
And that is a definite role of the artist, right? Is to take something that has been suppressed or made invisible and make it visible
again. Yeah.
And in this case, we are joining. I mean, sometimes it is often said that the artist sees or hears or notices what others don't, and so on. And that's not the case here. We are not seeing or saying something that no one knows, but we are joining in with many others who are pointing that out and resisting to accept that it is being silenced.
And that maybe brings us to the question of how you produce this performance, because you work, as I began the interview on talking about that, you work with over 200 people, and you're a visual artist, but you become as producers where you have a lot of composers, musicians, and the method by which you produce a spectacle maybe or a performance reflects how the assembly was of the Constitutional Assembly was also something drawn from every parts of life, every walks of life. I think what was fascinating is that you engaged so many people. This is a large-scale production taking many years, and this must have been a lot of.
That's been crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe you answered
maybe.
But still, it's important to maybe, and the right point to start maybe is to mention Cycle Art Festival, Cycle Music and Art Festival, Cycle Listahátíð, as a key partner and collaborator in the whole process and in making this possible with us.
Producing it, etc. Because it started. We made a project within an exhibition that Cycle Music and Art Festival did in 2017.
We initiated it.
Which was actually going into the history of the constitutions in Iceland, and we were working with the National Archive and all the books of the constitutions that were available and original to be presented as a sculptural installation. I won't go into that, but that's how the collaboration starts with Cycle, which becomes a partner and a core of what we have called the Magic Team, which is this elastic collective with all these people participating in it and artists. And without Cycle Music and Art Festival, Guðni Gudmundsdóttir, the director and curator of this piece with us together, and also then later coming in Sunna Austursdóttir, the curator coming from the visual arts, it would have been impossible. And this is like the smallest
work with Cycle and the Reykjavik Art Festival.
Yeah. And then
Sunna is not from Reykjavik Art Festival. Sunna is now
as an independent curator, she came into the project.
She is now managing director of not sure what's the right title of the position. She is one of the directors of one of the directors at the Living Art Museum. But I wanted to say actually to be concrete, the framework for which we were invited, or within which we initiated the process, the framework of cycle was a 2-year or a 2-time or a biennial festival, actually, that and our time is probably long gone.
One question more than
I just want to mention that because it's interesting to the whole process that it was a 2-festival series held in the frame of, or in relation to the 100 years anniversary of the sovereignty of Iceland from Denmark. So that's the kind of context from out of where we start to work on this In Search of Magic proposal for a new constitution of the Republic of Iceland.
Your question, the problem is now is time, because your question is
it's a big one.
It's a big one.
I think we have
and the collaboration has been like with people like I wanted to come back to the role of the artist, because we had this question before, and it's a very interesting question. It's like, as a visual artist and having a background as a conceptual artist and sociopolitically engaged, you are also redefining the role of artists and what do we consider also artworks and art projects. And the role that we were having in this work has been so many, because we initiated the project, we have been artistic directors and collaborators, and within the collective of the activists and other artists, part of that collective as well. And we have been also producing it and co-producing it with the curators together. So in a way it spans and flows, and these different people also have been in dialogue at different stages of the project with us and with each other, and they also flow organically, like having started maybe having one role and becoming another role within the project. And that's kind of magical as well. I wanted to say that's defying borders.
And would you say that the role of the artist in this case also is to make visible the symbols that we use? That was my last question. The role of the artist to make visible certain symbols that we use to govern our life. Democracy uses the election system to govern our life. And what you bring forth is a performance that makes visible the electoral process, and an electoral process that didn't then have the results that they were intended to have. So are you because you seem to be working also with the symbols of using the voice, using the vote, using the demonstration process, and these symbols of being a member of society. Are you? And here comes the question: are you doing as the situation is that you are criticizing these symbols, or are you rather encouraging people to use democracy and use the electoral system to vote, to be active, to participate, or is it a cynical criticism of this process? Where do you stand in that relationship?
No, it's not a cynical criticism. No. Though we can be critical to all kinds of structures within the democracy as we know it here, and in this case in the context of Iceland. This work has been to empower, let's say, a civil demand and struggle, and use the art as a representative tool as well to be active part in that democratic context and empowering, we hope, and in a way taking agency through art together with many other realms of society here, because it's not like just, it's like
therefore
all kinds of other people and organizations and groups and etc. are being active in society and having agency to question what happened with the new constitution and what is still happening, and demanding the process to continue, no? To go at least to the parliament and to be checked out by the parliament, which never happened, and to use art as having that agency with the rest as well, together with
therefore
that idea.
And we haven't, I mean, we've not at all almost mentioned, like, I mean, the constellation of the performers, the how they're put together,
how they were
how we decided to write the music, how we how we invented the concept of how it would come together, who would write what, all that. But I mean, very
when
important.
he says we, he means we with the composers also, because these are all authors, these are co-authors, so it will be good also to have a moment to bring also some of the other artists to talk about it.
Therefore,
we have to.
Yeah.
I think.
But I just
talk about this more.
I just wanted to say that it was very important that there were music of different genres. You know, when I've laid it at least on the table, then I've said that was very important to the piece, that the work would be as well as of different. Ages, people, and different abilities and so on. That the work itself was inclusive, and not just to reflect how we believe that the Constitution, the new proposal, wishes to be inclusive, but also to challenge actually ourselves to actually make our best for that. If this new document gets implemented, that we have to try to infuse it, or to bring as much of inclusivity and critical thinking with it, if it gets so.
As possible.
So, Ólafur Ólafsson, Libia Castro, this is something that we will continue discussing, because it's an open-ended question, I think, what will happen to the Constitution, and it's also an open-ended question how art can influence us to have a voice and act in society. Certainly, I think your work is very interesting. It has followed this process from the beginning and culminates now. I hope it will continue, even though you will get an award.
The next stage is an exhibition that opens at Hafnarborg 20th of March.
Yeah.
So, and who knows what will happen? It's art can be a ritual, and maybe this is a magical ritual that will empower people.
The ritual was very important also, the commoning together for the performance. Sorry, I have to say it. And also you were mentioning, when we were mentioning agency, I have to go back, and you said, how do you see this bridge between 70s and 60s and today? And I wanted just to mention one artist, Tanya Bruguera, who coined the term useful art. Is again a redefinition of socially engaged, arte útil, socially engaged artistic practices today. And I just wanted to mention that because this is one of the things, for example, that is happening in that field.
And it will continue in an exhibition this year in
a couple of weeks.
In a couple of weeks,
a couple of weeks. And so I hope people will continue to be participants in this, and they certainly will be as just being part of the Icelandic society. But hopefully they will see your work as bringing something useful to that. So thank you very much, and again, congratulations.
Thank you.